Today on Platts Energy Week, in the air and on the seas, the Navy brings biofuels to new levels. Then the Army goes even greener with plans for renewable energy at its bases. But first, the cost of making alternative energy a military priority. Is it worth it? You're watching Platts Energy Week, your independent source for energy news.
Hello, I'm Bill Loveless. Welcome to Platts Energy Week. The U.S. military is becoming a major player in new markets of biofuels and renewable energy. It's an issue we'll explore in the special Memorial Day edition of Platts Energy Week, starting with biofuels. Last year, the Defense Department bought 450,000 gallons of biofuels for fighter jets and other aircraft, and it plans to become an even bigger buyer in coming years. But these alternatives are costly, and some say excessive, given deep budget cuts facing the military. Not so, says Colorado's senior senator, Democrat Mark Udall. I spoke with him on Capitol Hill. Senator, the Pentagon faces enormous budget cuts. Can it continue to test biofuels, given the expense? They cost far more than conventional fuels. Can it continue to go on with that?
I think the Pentagon should continue to invest in biofuels. Here's why. In the long run, it'll be cheaper. And by that I mean in the long run, the forces we have to deploy overseas to protect oil supply lines can be reduced. In the long run, as fossil fuel prices increase, and they will, we know that is a given, having a competitor, if you will, in the essence of biofuels will be important. And if you look at the history of the military, through their R&D investments, we've seen enormous advances in our way and quality of life. Look at, for example, GPS or the Internet, synthetic rubbers. I mean, the medical advances that have gone on because of the work that the Pentagon has employed. All of that adds up to me to the argument that we should make this investment. Yes, we should be smart about it, and we're not going to convert overnight to these new fuels. But this is a step forward for national security, for job creation, and there will be environmental benefits, as you know. And if I could add one other comment, in theater, we've learned, tragically, that the cost of transporting fuel is enormous. So the more we can come up with substitutes, the better. And we'll take care of our men and women in uniform as well.
Well, some would argue that the cost is enormous right now, and maybe that is just the pressure is felt much more now than it has been in the past because of the financial situation with the government. But the Navy in December paid $26 a gallon for drop-in biofuels. Yes. And at the time, jet fuel cost about $4 a gallon. The Pentagon said in 2020 the cost of the biofuels would still be higher than conventional fuels, some $5.40 according to one report from the Pentagon.
Yeah, those numbers should not be ignored, but I believe if you look at history and you look at the trends, those numbers are going to come down, and we will be well served in the long run by making these investments. If you talk to the researchers, you talk to the scientists, you talk to engineers, this whole area of biofuels is the place in which, if you look at energy future technology, the most potential for significant breakthroughs. I'm not proposing that we would have a Moore's Law type dynamic, but I'm convinced that over time the price of these biofuels is going to drop dramatically. And we should, I think, in the overall R&D budget for the military, make this kind of investment. Not every bet pays off, but I'm convinced this is the right thing to do.
Do you think the market for biofuels can develop without the military's involvement?
The market for biofuels is robust right now. If you look at some of the numbers that point to the fact that we're importing less oil than we have in a couple of decades, it's in part because of the advances in the worlds of ethanol and biodiesels and the like. So the marketplace, I think, will continue to grow, but certainly the Pentagon's involvement would add heft. It would add momentum. It would add importance to what we're trying to do.
Does that become more important as the availability of government subsidies for renewable energy tapers off?
It does, because the Pentagon has a healthy budget. As you know, national security is at the top of everybody's list, certainly at the top of my list, serving on the Armed Services Committee and now on the Intelligence Committee. So there's a synergy here that I think is really important. And it would be short-sighted, in my opinion, although those here in Washington disagree with me, to cut off this work that the military is doing right now. The Navy in particular has an impressive set of goals. Secretary Mabus is leading. He has the full support of Admiral Greenert and other Navy leaders. Let's give them what they're asking to have. They know the price of being dependent on fossil fuels, particularly those that are produced in a foreign setting.
Well, as you know, there's been increased questions in the Congress these days about the cost. There's been suggestions, the House bill, for example, would preclude the military from buying biofuels if they cost more, at least buying them in large quantities if they cost more than conventional fuels. You've always treated or viewed renewable energy as a bipartisan issue. Is it any less so right now?
Well, it's a little bit worrisome that the House has taken this step, although these steps were taken in the committee. The full House has to weigh in. The Senate Armed Services Committee, on which I serve, will weigh in, and the full Senate will weigh in. I think we'll come to a place where we agree we ought to monitor what's happening. We ought to balance out cost versus opportunity. But this is an investment that, to me, really makes sense. And if it makes sense to our military leadership, which are, by the way, nonpartisan, and they've also shown the capacity to look over the horizon, if you will, to bring some vision to the challenges of our energy systems, then I think we ought to back them up. We ought to give them the resources that they want. We ought to provide the oversight. We shouldn't suggest that this is going to go on indefinitely, but I really believe that this is a frontier that we ought to embrace as America. It's no different from the frontier that was space, the frontier that was the new energy, the new information technology that we now use and across civilian life as well as in the military.
Senator Mark Udall, thank you very much.
Hey, thanks for having me on, Bill.
Coming up next.